Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and today we are talking about DC comic books, Absolute Batman, and we're going to be talking about DC Comics All In. Absolute. Or is it Absolute All In? I don't know. I can't tell anymore. But there is a lot of hype around this comic book right now about Absolute Batman, and maybe just for the Absolute universe as a whole. So we'll find out. We'll talk about more about, is this comic really worth picking up? Is it worth the hype? The hype levels of this comic has really got way bigger than I was anticipating, to be quite honest. So anyway, but before we get started, as always, I hate to be the obnoxious person here. Go and subscribe to the Comic Binge if you haven't already. Appreciate everyone already has. Like the video, etc., etc. Yeah, we won't waste much more time. We'll get right into it. So, my friends, Chris will be joining us here soon, but we have Javi Trujillo to my right here, or to my left, whatever. Yeah, to my right. I'm not sure. To my left, your left, whatever.
I'm just by your side, Paul.
There you're by side. Yeah, there you go. Stage right. AKA El Corazon. This was his idea, by the way. Everyone, he was the one really championing.
Blame him.
No, not blame. I'm just saying. I know, but he wanted the show. He wanted to talk about Absolute Batman. I'm like, you know what? I've trusted Javi before. He hasn't steered me wrong.
Behind the curtain, if you follow me online, I'm a senior contributor to Batman on Film, so we get the books ahead of time so we can write reviews to come out day of. Like today, wow. Batman and Robin number 14 came out. The Philip Kennedy Johnson first issue of a new story arc going all in on Batman and Robin. Yeah. So I got to see this book early because of that, and I've been dying to talk to someone else about it. So I'm glad the release date is here. And spoilers, I am all in on this title.
I'm going to just tease a little bit. I'm very glad you pounded the table for this episode, to be quite honest. So I'll leave it there. So last but not least, our good friend, other main contributor here, Adam, the Pizza Time Absolute Adam. I actually kind of like Absolute Adam. It's pretty good. That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah. I was saving it for this if we did this. Sort of, kind of, I don't know.
Kind of all that jazz. So I would say you're more of a Marvel reader, just by default. Is that what you'd say?
Yeah, more or less. I guess.
You've effed around with a little bit of DC. I've made you F around with DC before. A
little bit of Batman, yeah.
Yeah,
not a lot of Batman, but I've read Year One and Dark Knight Returns. And
those are standard. You have to read.
Of course,
those.
Killing Joke. Yeah, I still haven't read Long Halloween. Actually, your favorite.
Yeah, it's all right.
Oh,
it's not bad.
Don't get Paul started on Long Halloween this week.
Listen, for the record, I actually like Long Halloween. I just think it's overrated.
Sure.
That's all I've said.
I've heard. I mean, I think we've kind of talked about this. Like, it's because of Tim Sale's art. Like, if it was
Tim Sale's art,
and someone else,
It'd be an above average Batman story without Tim Sale. Period. That's it. Yeah. It's absolute trash. You're right. That's exactly what that is. I'm just kidding, Pete.
I am looking forward though to the Wade Somni Batman and Robin Year One that's coming out next week. I've been waiting for a Somni Batman book, so.
Wait, which one is it?
Batman and Robin Year One.
Oh,
it's a limited series written by Mark Waid.
Yeah.
I sent you the black and white cover.
That's what it was.
Okay. Yeah, they're doing a noir edition of it.
That comes out next month, I believe.
Next week, I think.
Well, the regular one comes out next week, but the noir I think comes out.
The noir is the month after.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe.
Okay, right on. Well, that's awesome because I'm excited to check it out. I forgot that was coming out. I mean, DC. Yeah. I mean, listen, I've gone ad nauseum about this, about DC Comics and about how well they have really turned around their publishing line in the last 2 years. things were starting to get better. I'd say 3 years ago, like they started transitioning, upwards a little bit. I think now they have it locked in. They are locked in a great creative teams and great, great ideas, and their events are not tied and locked into each other that where you have to like, be invested and all that. You can kind of get in and get out pretty easily. As someone, as a reader who I don't read those events and don't want to read the events, I'm able to do it just fine. And so it's as a Marvel zombie, it's really hard for me to like, not hard, but it's just hilarious to me that I'm just so in on DC Comics, and I have been the last couple of years. I've been saying this for a long time, that they have finally turned around their publishing line. When I say all of it, I mean everything. They've turned around their trades, their graphic novels. They've got great adult content, or more mature content, quote unquote. That's not just Vertigo stuff, but like the Black Label stuff has been great. The regular all ages publishing line has been great. When I'm talking about all ages, I mean like, the regular Batman and Superman stuff. So when DC Comics announced the Absolute Universe, Javi, I'm not sure if you have the absolute picture of everybody up there, if you can throw it up there for me, but when they announced the Absolute Universe, it was very easy for me to kind of be dismissive and say, okay, I get it. It's, it's the ultimate version of the Batman, Superman. I get it. And I think and to be fair, I think that's an accurate statement. It's literally the ultimate version. Now, the Marvel and DC have been aping each other since the dawn of their time, right? Let's be real. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to dismiss anything because of that. So, but it's easy to dismiss it when you hear that, right? And when you have like Scott Snyder being the head kind of honcho of the Absolute Universe, and then you have Hickman being the head honcho of the Ultimate Universe of the Marvel side, it's easy to be like, okay, I get it, but listen, I'm not the biggest Scott Snyder fan. I'm not saying I don't dislike him. I don't love a lot of his stuff. I don't go out to read his stuff. I think he's a solid writer, but he's very hit and miss for me. So when he was the head person, I'm like, okay, we'll see what happens. So, but again, DC's done a really good job and has earned my interest level enough, and have earned my respect and my attention enough to where I'm going to give these things a chance. So, before we get into, I guess, everything, Pizza Time, aka Absolute Adam, going into this, did you have any, you read Marvel and Ultimate stuff for, the Spidey Dude experience and everything. What was your kind of take when you heard this was announced originally with the Absolute Universe?
I mean, I guess I was thinking that it seemed like they were doing an Ultimate thing because the Marvel's newest Ultimate thing has been going really well this year. That's kind of the long and short of it. Do we want to talk about the Batman design and stuff?
Not yet. We'll save that for later.
So let me interject really quick,
please,
because I can see, and this just kind of occurred to me right as we were warming up for the show. Like, it's easy to look at this and make the comparison of Ultimate is a hit again for Marvel. Like, they did the original Ultimate Universe in the early 2000s, and DC tried to get in on that with All-Star Superman and All-Star Batman and Robin, and the line quickly fizzled out. Like, they didn't even finish All-Star Batman and Robin. And then they kind of tried again to be like a more streamlined, new entry point, reader-friendly version with the Earth One line of graphic novels.
I was thinking of that, because especially with how they described Batman, it seemed like that was kind of sort of going the Earth One route a little bit. Yeah. Maybe.
Like they tried to, make that happen, but they were so slow in publishing those stories that it never really gained any traction. Like it would be years between volumes. And at the end, the most we ever got was 3 volumes or 4 volumes of All-Star or of I'm sorry, Superman Earth One. I don't think it was 4. I think it was 3, and we got 3 obviously of
There were 3
Batman.
Batman, yeah.
3 of Wonder Woman, 2 of Green Lantern, 2 of Titans, and that was it. We never got Aquaman, we never got Flash, and that just also kind of died out, right? And so looking at this, it's easy to see, well, okay, Marvel did it again with the new Ultimate Universe. Now it's DC's turn, except the thing about that is that while it's easy to look at it at the surface and be like, okay, we're putting a fresh coat of paint on things and tweaking costume designs and what's up, Chris? But the thing about the Ultimate Universe is you read the first 7 issues, and that's Bendis's adaptation of Ultimate or Amazing Fantasy 15.
That's a good point.
And then you start to go through and you're like, okay, we're waiting for Ultimate this. We're waiting to see the Ultimate Doc Ock, the Ultimate Green Goblin, the Ultimate Sinister Six. We get to an Ultimate Clone Saga. Like you started to expect them to do the old stories, but in like a modern context of it, right? It kind of became a trap where you were expecting certain things to happen, and every now and then they would subvert it by, okay, Gwen died, but then she became Carnage, kind of thing. And what I like about this Absolute Universe is because it has, and we'll get into this with All In, because the foundation of it is so different. And the ads, which I didn't pull any of the ads, but the ads are basically, stripping away who these characters are. Like Absolute Batman, no mansion, no money, absolute warrior. Absolute Superman, no fortress, no family, absolute defender. And Wonder Woman's I don't have with me, but it's basically the same thing. Like she's not from paradise, she's from hell, basically, right? So because of that, like I don't expect this to follow those guidelines. Like I don't expect this to like, okay, we're going to mirror the main DC universe and he's going to get Dick and then Jason and then Tim and Jason's going to die. Like I don't expect us to follow any of that, because as we talk about this issue, outside of Batman being Bruce Wayne and there's similar characters or character names, nothing is really the same. And so we don't have to be beholden to like retelling classic stories. Like everyone is starting off at ground zero here, or at the ground floor. Like it doesn't matter if you've read 85 years of Batman comics or this is your first issue. Like you get everything you need. You don't have to worry about what happened in the main DC universe or on Earth 2, because everything is all right here and it doesn't have to mimic what happened before, which is, I think, is going to be a key factor as this universe goes forward.
So that's greatly put, Javi. And Chris, I'm curious, before we get into All In and Absolute Batman, thank you for coming on. I know you probably had a rough night, it sounds like. My question, to you, because I don't want to throw you on the bus, but you're not reading the Ultimate stuff right now. I don't, and not because you don't want to, it's because we're both, we're all extremely busy. From the outside of the Ultimate Universe being reimagined by Jonathan Hickman and this whole new thing has been ushered in, and it's had some pretty good success, it sounds like. I'm reading right now only Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimates, which has been both have been fantastic, to be honest. From the outside perspective, as a DC head, if you will, like yourself, what was your initial reaction? I mean, I generally know what it was, but tell the viewers, what was your initial reaction to the Absolute Universe and the kind of the mission statement, if you will?
I mean, my first like knee-jerk reaction was just like, I'm a fan of the Absolute line, and
that's right.
Do we need to use this word to delineate this alternative universe? I mean, it's a stupid thing.
Leave it to Crow.
What popped into my head. I guess like I was reasonably open to it, largely because of the creative teams that they seemed to install. I mean, Jason Aaron briefly did some Superman stuff in Action Comics with Bizarro when they seemed like they were kind of changing their mind about the direction that they wanted Action to go in, with like an anthology style kind of set of stories. But that didn't last very long. So now that we're doing the lead into the All In stuff, it's just like it's I don't need an alternative DC universe. I mean, it was kind of the same reaction that I initially had to the Earth One line back when it was announced like 1,000 years ago, right? It's just like, it seemed at the time, that seemed to me like an excuse to try and artificially darken the conceptions of the characters to bring them up to modern standards. Of course, the material of the stories, that's not what Earth One did, like, especially we talked about Superman Earth One on this show, but I mean, of course, with Batman Earth One and Wonder Woman by Grant Morrison, Batman by Jeff Johns, and Superman by J. Michael Straczynski, there's a lot more lineage to the traditional conceptions of the characters. And like, I was expecting more differences there than there ended up being, and was honestly a little disappointed that they stuck as straight as they did. Like, the biggest deviations in Earth One were probably for the way that they characterized Batman and some of the specifics of Wonder Woman. I haven't read some of the other stuff. Like, I know Jeff Lemire did Teen Titans, even though Robin doesn't exist in that world. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. So with this, I was curious about how they were going to differentiate from Earth One, because Earth One, it seems like that line is effectively abandoned. I haven't heard anything or any rumblings really of them continuing it. And Earth One seemed like it had a similar mission statement to try and bring new people into the fold, unbind creators from long-standing canon, and let them tell different kinds of stories. But right out of the gate, it appeared like Absolute had more of what I thought Earth One would be, like some significant differences in the primary characterizations of the main characters. And this was before like the All In initiative was in plain view, let's say.
Okay.
So, I'll save perspectives for the appropriate time in the conversation, but I think that what they're doing here is actually a little more radical than what the original conception of the Ultimate Universe did, because that was kind of like an Earth One-ish approach. Marvel did it first, of course, with Ultimate, but the Ultimate versions of the characters, for the most part, save for a couple of specific examples like Captain America, the one I have the biggest problem with probably, everyone is pretty well in line with who they've always been in the original version of the Ultimate Universe. Here, it seems like the order of the day with the current conception of the Ultimate Universe and now with Absolute is to actually try to stretch the constitutions of the characters. And I'm here for it so long as the stories are good. This isn't like it's doing away with the DC universe. I've got that world, and it seems like, especially after reading All In, that it's a pretty fascinating time to be reading DC Universe stuff. Having this as a complement to that, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to feel that way in 6 months, but right now, the freshness, the novelty is enough to keep me interested before you actually get to the content of the stories. And then when it comes to the content of the stories, well, we'll get to that.
What? That's really well said. And I think the thing about, I like what both you and Javi have both kind of brought up was the Earth One stuff, which I just remembered that I forgot to pick up Green Lantern Earth One Volume 2, and now it's like $30. It's just ridiculous. Oh, wow. I know, is that crazy? I got like Volume 1 for like $8, and then I'm like, what? Why did this happen? And
it must be because didn't and Javi knows this, I think. Didn't Gunn share an image of Green Lantern Earth? So that set the speculators off.
I hate specs. Anyway, the thing about the Earth One line is that the ideas and the creative teams are similar to what we're getting in Absolute. The difference is that they try to package it for a new reader, and which is good, but it's not the price point, and like the anticipation for it wasn't equal. So it's like, I love Batman Earth One. The problem is that it took so long to get the three out, and that they read really well together as one volume.
Yeah.
Right. That's the problem. And I think that when you do that, and they're kind of expensive because they're like nice and hardbound, like they're nice hardcovers. The problem is that they're not really worth it. Now DC's fixing that with the whole Compact Comics line, which is, by the way, I put in American Vampire in my in-stock wish list last week. I did a big in-stock purchase today, went to put it in there, sold out.
Nice.
Gotham City Sirens, sold out. Like, Compact Comics are killing it for regular readers, new readers. Dude, it's awesome. More Compact Comics, please. Anyway, so now they've kind of figured that whole thing out. I feel that with the Absolute, I can totally see these Absolute, these first 5 issues being put in a compact comic, or double it, whatever, and selling it for $6 and people just gobbling it up, everything, because there is such an easy entry point. And I think that with the Earth One stuff, same thing. It'd be cool if they can rename it, not just Earth One. Maybe like, what does Earth One mean? Just to say Batman, just a story title out there. And I think Compact Comics can eat it up. Excuse me, and people can understand it. Now, with the Absolute line, it is cool. I think they're going a little bare bones approach, but there's a reason, right? And we'll get into that reason now, which is introduced. Javi, if you can pull it up for me, the all-in comic book one shot that was advertised back in San Diego Comic-Con last summer. And I saw a lot of the writers being like, "Are you all in? Are you all in?" It was kind of like a joint thing, and whenever like you have like joint people being like, "Oh, it's we're all in together, guys. We're a team. We're whatever." That's awesome.
Nice.
I'll blow you up here, Chris. Hold on a second. Javi, maybe do the honors, please. Yeah, like it's crazy.
Did you
to me
get the
that
foil on the other cover, Chris, or is that the standard?
You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. It's okay.
Has to happen at least one. It happened at work today too, and I was punching myself for it. No, this is just the standard cover.
Okay,
I got the foil
on that one.
Was that a limited ratio on that? I don't think I saw that in my shop.
I don't remember. I just put it in my cart a while ago.
Sure, yeah. Well, I definitely had to get this one.
That's a great cover.
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up here in a second, guys. But basically, the thing is with when they're announcing, the writers are all like all in. I'm all in. Are you all in? Blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, I get it. It's like rah, whatever. I just kind of, I'll wait to see, and I honestly wasn't going to pick it up because I'm already all in on DC right now anyway. I love what they're doing in the comics. The interesting thing about it was I found out, it's the introduction to the universe of the Absolute universe. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to buy this just to kind of get the idea of it. So I wasn't really ready for I just thought it was going to be its own thing, like its own, but there was actually a legitimate reason for it, which has a lot of ties into DC continuity, which is cool. I won't lie, Adam, that there is with the Maker and Ultimate Universe and with Darkseid with this, it's a little
similar,
little similar.
It's funny because I didn't really read the Ultimate preamble, if you will, like all that stuff.
I didn't either. Yeah.
But the thing is, I was thinking that's like, yeah, this is like, Darkseid is the Maker, etc.
But, and I'll throw it to the DC heads here, the resident DC heads. As we get into All In, without spoiling too much, there's a lot of, and again, they do a good job of, I don't forget who the main writers were. Maybe it was Scott Snyder who wrote it, the whole thing. But I will give them
Williamson did it too.
a Williamson. God, I love Williamson.
Yeah.
He's great, man. I
They
love
teamed
him.
up on it. Yeah.
So they did a great job of giving us when you're, because if you don't know, if you can throw up the different covers, throw up the absolute one first. That's the one I read. The absolute all in cover.
Oh,
So I read the original, the absolute one first, and they do a lot of setup for what's going on, for why this universe will exist in the first place.
What did you read first?
The absolute version of All In. Like there's
The absolute side.
Yeah,
The
side.
Okay, the dark side.
Whatever.
Omega.
Yeah.
He read Omega before Alpha, so
Yeah.
he read it out of order. Yeah.
I don't think it matters, to be
No,
honest.
it doesn't really.
Not really, but
I was
'Cause
just thinking
I-
that, it kind of doesn't.
Alpha
Yeah.
comes before Omega typically. That's
But I
what
didn't even-
determined the reading order for me. I was like, oh, okay, Alpha first. Yeah,
I didn't even read there was an alpha or omega. Because honestly, I was like, I want to read about the absolute version first. That's the one I was most interested in. But they do a great job on both alpha and omega, of setting the new reader up. Because I don't know anything. All I know is in the real life they wanted to make the continuities as cohesive as possible without mucking everything up. And I think DC's done a good job, to be honest. I'm surprised it's as well as it has, of getting the reader like myself up to speed with why it's being created in the first place with Darkseid, which I don't want to spoil here because it's interesting. So if you're a DC diehard, you're going to love it. If you're a complete noob like me or don't really know what's going on, it catches you up to speed and it's interesting. It's way more interesting than the Maker, to be quite honest with you. So before I throw the DC heads, Adam, do you want to add anything about the creation of the Absolute Universe by Darkseid?
I thought it was good. I thought it was interesting. Not much else to say behind that. I do like that there's the context for why everything is different because it's Darkseid's world essentially. And getting Darkseid to that point was interesting character work, I thought.
For sure.
So yeah, it's good. It is good context for especially going into Absolute Batman.
Yeah, for sure. It was not because I had no idea like what the premise was completely, to be honest. I was pretty like, yeah, I was like, oh, okay. And I mean, in the Absolute Universe, I kind of had an idea, but reading the Omega side, it definitely put it in perspective of what exactly Darkseid's trying to do. It's interesting. I was like, oh, it's very interesting what they're doing here. Javi, I'll throw it to you next.
Real quick.
Go, please,
I guess
please.
I remember it being advertised as an event, but I guess I also forgot that because both of this new Absolute thing and this new Ultimate thing, they're both like events of
Absolute power.
It like implying that there will be an end to them. But
sure.
I guess we'll see. Anyway, it's interesting. It's all very interesting.
Absolute power is something different.
Oh, is it? Okay. See, I didn't even follow.
They did reference it though. In this.
Yeah. I mean, this is post absolute power, and we get at the beginning of each story, like we get a time frame. Like the DC side of things, it's 52 days later because 52.
Yeah.
When you flip to the Omega story, it's 52 days earlier. And I just want to point out right now, too, that if you read the Alpha story, you have Daniel Sampierre doing the art.
Fantastic
which,
artist.
if you've watched us before rave about the Warworld saga, he did a lot of the early issues of that. And then you flip to the Omega side of things, you get Wes Craig, who's been doing a lot of variant covers for DC. And it gives it such a different feel.
It's a grit.
Because this is basically the same scene right here. But then you flip to the Alpha art and you have like this more heroic looking piece to everything. And then Wes Craig is a lot grittier and darker, and you can see by his variant cover that we've been showing up, like he's not cartoony. There's a little bit of like
There's
Darwin
realism.
Cook and Patrick Gleason
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Kirby,
yeah,
Cook.
Kirby for sure. There's a whole lot of, but it's a more stylized look than what we get with Daniel. And what
It's a great. That's a great page.
and
That's a
it
fantastic
plays
page.
off of so much, because not only does it reference like some key dark side moments throughout his history, but I think it was the New 52, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that made it kind of detached the New Gods from the multiverse. Like, yeah, there's like 52 different Supermans, 52 different Batmans, but there's only one dark side. There's all the New Gods. There's only one version of them across the multiverse. At least that's, if my recollection serves, like that's how they were handling Darkseid for the New
That's
52.
what ultimately allowed Darkseid to face off against the Anti-Monitor. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this picks up that baton and runs with it in terms of like what Darkseid's importance is and why the schism happens at the end or the middle of the story, depending on how you want to look at it. And I had a thought I was going with that, but
So
Absolute Power. Sorry. Absolute Power was like a summer event series where Amanda Waller is like decided like
that's right.
enough, and
Okay,
she basically uses like AI and she gathers her own trinity of evil to discredit the heroes with a lot of false information. So everyone thinks that the heroes have gone crazy and they're all going after them. Like the whole populace of the entire planet thinks that the heroes have gone rogue, and it wasn't something I really was planning on getting invested in, but I read the first issue and I was just kind of blown away by it. So then I wound up reading all the other tie-ins, because she had an army of Amazos that would take out specific heroes, and that just wrapped up. So the culmination of everything, like the reason that we start this 52 days later, it's 52 days later after the conclusion of Absolute Power.
Gotcha.
So this is them rebuilding after this thing that pretty much almost destroyed them, because she had everyone in an internment camp. No one had their powers whatsoever because the Amazos had siphoned them off. So
yeah. So, reading All In, it does a great job, I think, of really showing you, the reader, what this absolute universe really is and what it represents. I guess it kind of sets up the regular DC universe too, but it more so gets you really in line and get you like what's behind this with Darkseid and the absolute universe and why its reason to exist. It's really fascinating. And I to be honest, I was surprised at how much I was like intrigued by this whole thing. And it sounds like, Adam, you're kind of the same way. Like it's a little different than what like the Maker was trying to do. And like the Maker thing is it's whatever, but Darkseid, it's a little more inspired here. And there definitely feels there's going to be a culmination of everything.
Right. Yeah.
But in like, as my favorite quotes is, Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money, it remains to be seen for, based on the success of these titles, how long they'll go for and what their livelihood or their lifehood is all about. So,
Sure. Yeah.
Reverend, I'm going to go to you. What was your take on the All In special and kind of your kind of initial introduction to the Absolute Universe?
I was really taken with just the choice of including the two stories on opposite sides before the eventual conversion or convergence happens in the middle, with the end of each story ending in the same place. I thought that was
you allowed to say convergence in DC?
Yeah, well, it's a better example of convergence than what you were alluding to. But I thought that was just a really cool idea to show just how intertwined these worlds are, and the shared legacy that does exist between them, even if they are ostensibly at least opposite sides of the same coin. I'm always going to be fascinated by choices that are made regarding the overarching cosmology of the DCU. And one of the things that has kind of been a struggle for me because I haven't kept up as much with the monthlies as I used to is that over the past several years, there are gaps, and those gaps can contribute to getting lost. But with the reintroduction of Snyder, I mean, the last major DC event that I read was Death Metal. And this is kind of a takeoff of what we saw at the end of Death Metal.
Yeah.
So it's a weirdly convenient way for me to pick up DC Universe event storytelling again. And it's kind of a logical progression of some of the things that Snyder did in Death Metal regarding the Omniverse, and the Darkest Nights are mentioned in there as well. But
yeah,
getting, I mean, obviously my heart still beats within the core DC universe. I mean, that's going to be the thing that I'm going to be most interested in, because it's got such a legacy. It has all these characters that I love so much, and we're getting to a point where the most definitive examples of every hero are starting to come back into the fold. And I love, like, this is not a new thing in comic book storytelling, particularly superhero comic book storytelling, but I love these kinds of things when we go through these valleys where there might be a temporary separation of the Justice League, for instance, and the reunification. As long as it's in the hands of a good creative team or teams, that's always a triumph that I'll keep coming back for that. That's always a good time for me, because I love the Justice League. I love all of the intertwining elements of the broader DC universe. You're bringing the new gods in. I loved that Mr. Terrific had such a prominent role in this issue. You're giving service to elements of the Legion. Booster, of course, plays a big role in that. So it seems like on the DCU side, this is a really great way to kick this initiative off, and probably like the event kickoff one shot I've enjoyed the most, probably since the Rebirth one shot. And that was 8 years ago now, which is pretty wild to think about.
Rebirth, that's a good point. Really, I just want to add really quick to that. That's a great point, because I liked Rebirth, and these big one shots that are kind of entry points. They are very hit and miss. Rebirth was very good, and it was kind of like trying to get people back invested on the DC side. That one did a lot of heavy lifting, had had to put in a lot of goodwill. The difference with this one, I would say, this is a no-brainer, this is no duh, but I would say that this one does a great job of really showing you like where it's headed, and like why. It does its job well, essentially, right? It's telling us where it's going, and that why we should be invested in it, and it does a great. And I think that's ultimately its job was, and it kicked its ass.
Yeah, I'd say that that's fair. And I mean, the thing with Rebirth too was that we had spent so many years. I mean, I guess 5 years isn't that more time has passed than the entirety of the New 52 existed within, which is another thing that's weird to think about. But that was like an era that had a beginning and an end to it. It's like a conception of the DC universe where you can track like the entire lifespan of it, which is kind of fun to think about. But there were fans who, instead of seeing the New 52 as a jumping on point, saw it as a jumping off point. And Rebirth, very much designed to bring those people back into the fold. This is different because I think there is generally a far higher level of goodwill toward the DC Universe line than there was back in the summer of 2016. There's not necessarily a need to win over the hardcore fans, but by having this bisection taking place, you are giving service to the core heroes that we have been reading for years. They are in a place that is wholly recognizable for longtime readers and recent converts. And at the same time, this bomb is going off that creates this whole other world that you can jump into if you want to. I'm not going to say that the Absolute side was less interesting to me. I was not quite as engaged with that side of it as I was the DCU side, and maybe Daniel Sampere has something to do with that. But I was very because I tried to stay away from any scuttle about what this could be about, what the actual genesis of the Absolute Universe was. My understanding is that the core details have been kind of out in the ether for at least a little while. And so it was pretty new to me. And I was very happy with the idea that the genesis of the Absolute Universe, no pun intended, is actually tied to longstanding DCU continuity, even if it is not bound by it. It kind of reminds me of what they did with the 2009 Star Trek film, where you have this inciting incident that splits the timeline in two. It doesn't affect the long-standing Prime timeline where all the stories that we had been watching for 50 years up to that point were still intact, but there's a whole other thing happening here. But it's also more complex than that because you're getting into cosmological elements of the DC universe with Darkseid, this unification between he and the Spectre that sets this off. But there's still even though the Absolute Universe is defined by its sense of darkness and where Hope has to really work against the tide of despair as defined by Darkseid, it is not a hopeless conception of the DC universe, at least as glimpsed in this special. I would have preferred getting a little more insight into the characters, particularly Superman, just because Superman has such a high level of importance to the DC universe as depicted here. You know, the defining feature of Hope in the DCU, that's Superman. So what does the opposite of that look like if there is a force that is, potentially about representing that hope, working against the tide of darkness? I think it would have been appropriate to include more details, but we'll just have to wait for Absolute Superman #1. As a package, this is a hell of a one-shot. I was very happy with it. And I'll be interested to see how things progress going forward. It did its job very well.
Javi, we were 40 minutes into this and we haven't even talked about the main thing, but do you want to add anything quickly on the All-In special?
Yeah, we get to have our cake and eat it too, right? Like Chris was saying, like this isn't a crisis where it's rebooting the timeline. Like everything that you read before this issue still mattered, still happened, still counts. And if you like this take on these characters, like you can read that, but it's not going to wash away. If you like the Warworld saga, like that still happened. If you like the Court of Owls, that still happened. If you like Death in the Family, that's still a thing. Like it's not starting everything over from scratch. So you can pick and choose what you like. And to be honest, I don't know how well I'm going to like Absolute Superman, especially with how perfect the titles are right now. But yeah, it doesn't matter because unlike the New 52, where I liked what was going on, and then the New 52 came in and wiped it all away and started from scratch. Like this isn't doing that. So you know what? If I don't like Absolute Superman, well, then I don't have to really read it, and I can just stick with Action and Superman, and that's fine. But I'm definitely going to give it a shot, and I think that's an important thing to understand is like Absolute Batman is not replacing Batman or Detective or Batman and Robin. And it's also not a Black Label book. This is like its own continuity, and they're all going to converge at some point because that's the end goal after they establish more of the Absolute line. Like we have 2 more titles coming, and beyond that we still have Absolute Green Lantern and Absolute Flash. And I don't remember if they announced anything else at this point. So they're still building it out, but eventually they're all going to collide in some summer event probably.
Yeah.
But until then, like, I mean, just have at it. Like, it just promises to be a good time. And if you choose to get on board, then
Yeah.
more power to you. But
Yeah, and I honestly don't understand the perspective that people have where, they're just gonna poo-poo any idea that a new conception can come along. I mean, it would be different if in 2000 the premiere of Ultimate Spider-Man,
We gotta get to the
Ultimate
comic.
if in 2000 the premiere of Ultimate Spider-Man #1 meant the cancellation of Amazing, but it didn't. This is not an either or, this is an and.
Yeah.
And you can choose the end, or you could stick with what you know. And
I think that's all valid too. And really quick, and I don't mean to rush us out of here. Again, we're almost an hour. We haven't even touched the book
yes,
yet.
you do. Yes, you do.
Fair enough. The thing is about the absolute so far is that it's not replacing anything. It's gonna be a fun way to have a alternate character, to really take the character, put it on its head without going overtly dark one way or at least in my opinion. And you can kind of play with it and have fun with it, and maybe even set up things in the future for future references for, whether it be movies or TV shows or whatever. I think if you were to do it like the Earth One Prime and just do a graphic novel centric kind of a thing, I think it kind of hurts the momentum of the stories, because there is something about the serialized format that the monthly comics give you that gives that anticipation for like another episode. And I think that's the one. Yeah. And I think that's the one thing about Absolute, or the ongoing comics in general, that have a fun way when you do collect it. People are, by the time they're getting the collection, there's already a built-in hype for the graphic novel. So might as well release it at least a couple times before, if you have the money and the resources like these big companies do. Like Ed Brubaker's got on record saying like it's not really worthwhile for him to release comics monthly anymore because of graphic novels and things like that. That makes more sense because that's more based on his bottom line. These big companies don't have to worry about that necessarily. It almost is cost prohibitive and makes it sense for them to pay for these books by putting them out monthly to cover the costs of making them in general, right? So but I do think there is a way that monthly comics is that kind of like the Penguin, right? That I haven't watched and I need to. A weekly storyline that people can consume and get pumped up for. It's that Game of Thrones idea that people are going to get excited to read it. So, I say all that to, Adam, I'm going to throw it to you first. Absolute Batman. You have, we know there's no money. There's no mansion. There's no Batmobile yet. What was your take reading Batman, Absolute Batman?
It's a good question. I like that they faked us out twice in the beginning.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh, this guy's Batman. No, this guy's Batman, and neither of them are Batman.
Light spoilers as much as possible, please.
I'm gonna try to not.
Do your best. That's all I say. That's all I can ask.
I will just say that there's fake. I like that there were fake outs. That I wasn't expecting that. It's good. I think I'll say my big. I think this is my big con. Maybe is that even with the context of this is Darkseid's world, I felt like this was very edgy. In a like, man, this is like brutal. Like this is kind of like, whew. But that being said, leading into a positive, a big pro was that when you see Batman in action, that despair, that like total carnage that is being wrought throughout Gotham City, it really, in this universe, there's this real sense of triumph and heroism when you see Batman start doing his thing here. And I think and the whole they really lean into the Bat theme here in a way that I haven't really seen too much, that I thought was really inspired. Bats are crazy. That's funny.
That was great. That was a great motif about their book.
Yeah. And yeah, and I like Dragata's art. You know, people were kind of shitting on it when he did that ASM issue in Wells's run, but I still liked it. I would say this is definitely better than that one issue, but I assume he's had more time because, you know, the Marvel scheduling for Spider-Man is a damn mess, and I think it really hurts the artists, but this was really good. And I like that this book has a visual identity, because you want that for these new like, you know, Elseworld, What If, alternate universe projects. You want it to have a look that will hook people in and be like, oh yeah, this is absolute Batman. And you know, I was kind of like mixed on the symbol being, you know, a rectangle essentially, and his build
with spikes on the end of it.
Yeah. And yeah, because like we were talking about this earlier, Paul. I feel like if it was like curved a little more, it would be. And you know, it's funny because I think if it was more geometrical, and I mean it is geometrical because it's a square, but if it was a little more like angled, I think it would kind of be like, see right here, it's actually angled, and it you know, it's curved, and it actually
because of the shirt. Yeah.
Well, but technically that shouldn't be
right. Yeah, I know. Right.
But it is. But that's the beauty of the medium, you know. Like you, and someone with a style like Dragata's is like, you do that, and it's like, oh, it looks cool, and it works. And the build, you know, the build is iffy for. I mean, I'm okay with it, but it's not like my favorite interpretation of most superheroes. Really, like I like a more, you know, athletic but not like huge look for most superheroes, but this is fine, you know, whatever. He's a powerhouse, so that's fine. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's like some of the stuff with the supporting cast is interesting. I like the one yeah, actually I should say, like, I read a few spoilers the other day. Sort of, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, that's okay, but you know, like, I don't know, we'll see how it plays out, but I'm interested in this still, I think, and I'm curious to see where the art goes.
Mm-hmm. You know, before I'm gonna give it to the DC heads here in a second, I'm Javi and Chris, I'm sure you're dying to know what I think about this comic, right? So you know, and Javi, you throw up the cover for me. I didn't know if I was going to read this, and Javi really was hyping it up for me. And I didn't realize that that it was being hyped up by a lot of people. It felt like there was a lot of buzz.
That was one of the reasons. That was kind of what started, you know, bringing me around to it, was the hype. Everyone kind of is into it, and I started looking more into the design aspect of it, of like why the character looks like this. I'm like, okay, I was kind of, and then, like we were talking about before, Snyder was being a good sport about the jokes, and like the absolute Spider-Man design that someone did. Yeah, that was all very endearing. It's like, okay, like he's not like, you know, throwing a fit about it or anything. He likes the jokes. He thinks it's funny, and it's like, okay, cool.
He definitely got a little pissy, I think, at first, a little bit. But
I didn't notice. I was noticing, I guess, after the fact.
Yeah. But enough to where he's obviously, I mean, anyone defending, you're creating something, you're going to defend it, right?
Sure,
like that's justified. I think the difference between him is he also poked fun at it. Like, I think every time someone complained about it to him, he kept like enlarging the logo.
Yeah, he was going to make the logo bigger.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. Like, it's that kind of stuff. Like, he's like, okay, just give it a chance. I'm going to poke fun at it. I'm going to poke fun at you. Like, that's not usually a way that works with online audiences, but I think it worked here. It worked with me, because at first I'm like, because I'll be honest, I think this logo is complete dog shit. Like, straight up, like, right? Now, in a vacuum, and Adam, we talked about this before, that I did not like the logo. I still don't like it just isolated by itself. I think it's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. In the context of the story, and Javi explained to me about before, but even when you explained to me before, Javi, I was like, yeah, whatever. in the context of this, of reading the Absolute All In and the comic book, I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm into it. I think it still could be better, but I'm splitting hairs at this point because I think Absolute Batman is 1000% worth the hype. Like Javi, you were on the money on it. I don't see how you could read this and not be like, that was pretty good. You know, because to me, it does all the things you need to do. It sets up the Batman universe. It sets up what we're dealing with. It's a completely different idea of the Batman mythos, but just, and again, I don't know if Ultimate Spider-Man inspired this pizza time,
Right.
but it feels like that. It's the spirit of the character to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I like about it. It's the spirit without rehashing everything. Now, you could say, you know, Batman Earth One did a good job of that too, a little bit, but it kind of kept that mythos still. But this takes it on the edge and really gives you a different take, without sacrificing, I think, what makes Batman tick as a person at its core. And the art was fantastic.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm going to say this right now, I love the straight ahead layouts that we get in this. As you can see here, the gutters are all super perfectly trimmed. Like they're not like, you know, stylized and out there, which again, I love a mixture of everything. This is so strictly like, you know, straight and to basically help to me, the reader hone in on what they need to hone in on, because it is such a very direct, you know, unique take. And I think that was a very stylized, a very in a purposeful way of layout for the comic book. And I think it works perfectly because everything it's so beautifully told. The story, the layouts and the storytelling is so beautifully told by the art that I appreciate that a lot. And I thought it was great. This is worth 100% picking up. I don't know if we're going to cover it I don't know. I have no idea what we're going to do with this book, because I'm kind of in the middle on this. I don't know if I want to do it every month or if we should do it, you know, when it's collected at 5 issues. But I gotta tell you, I'm open to opening it every issue because it's that interesting to me. It is such a departure. I even don't hate the logo within the context of a story. Isolated by itself, within context is key.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty good. I think Absolute Batman's a 100%, like, I'd give it an 8.59 out of 10. It's that good.
Yeah.
It's very, very good. Adam,
I almost thought, like, you know, the preview they released, they show him chopping off a guy's hand with that logo. And I was like, I was going back and forth on that. I was like the other day, because I was thinking, like, is that maybe a little much? I don't know. But then you get the context of it, and it's actually, you know, it's like poetry or rhymes. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's why he could, that makes sense why he would cut the guy's hand off. Anyway.
Yeah. So Adam, really quickly, you think it's worth the hype? Just curious before we move on.
I would say, I mean, worth maybe. Like, I like it. And I'm intrigued, and this does look like it's going to be worth following monthly. And I would say it does seem like a good, like, if you want a different Batman story and you're kind of like, maybe you're not feeling what's happening currently with mainline Batman, and you're like, kind of, you want, you know, a twist. This seems like a good replacement, or just whatever you want. But yeah, I mean, I would recommend it. Worth the hype, maybe. The art is hype.
It is. It's very good. I love it.
And it's a recommend, I would say, to at least if you want to try something different, like a new spin on Batman. I think it's worthwhile.
Javi, you want to talk about the book?
Here
Go ahead. There you go, man. It's all you.
I mean, just from the start, like I just got sucked into the book and the vibe that it was going for. And like you mentioned, Paul, like it takes lots of twists and turns, and you think you know who's narrating the story, and you think you know who certain characters are, and things get switched around, which is part of the fun of it. Um, and it's so weird because it feels like a Snyder book, but it also doesn't. It feels like a whole bunch of other things. Like I look at this image, and that I don't know, that feels like Zero Year. It feels like something out of Snyder's 52 run. Um, and and the art is just I don't know. I seem like there's shades of like Frank Miller paneling, but there's if you look
Definitely.
at like Batman, like it's like a Dark Knight Returns body, but with like a Tim Sale head almost
Yeah.
with the longer ears and like looking at like that face,
I
like
like that.
that looks like a Tim Sale face to
Yeah.
me. And it's just there's so many different aspects of Gotham and Batman that you see. And I've been talking about this all year long. It's the 85th anniversary of Batman. And obviously, in 85 years of storytelling across how many different mediums, like there's going to be motifs, you're going to see a lot of repetition at times. And like just reading this, like I feel elements of like the Dark Knight Returns. I feel elements of the Batman because it's so early on in his career. You feel elements of Year One, and it's just there's a lot of familiarity going on in this book, but it all feels like brand new because of how they're deciding to tell the story and introduce the characters. Like we haven't even talked about Black Mask at all, who is completely terrifying in this book, and his gang, the party animals or the party goers,
Party
party
animals.
something, party animals,
Yeah.
like they are every bit as vicious as Frank Miller's The Mutants, maybe even more so. The
Yeah.
stuff that gets described in the newscasts is straight up like horrendous. And it's just like I was saying earlier, it's like, yes, Alfred's in this. Yes, Killer Croc and Selena and Oswald and Eddie Nigma are all in this, but we haven't seen them in this way before. They don't have these connections. Like Batman or Bruce being friends with Wayland. Um, that's a switch. That's not something we've seen before. Maybe, them all knowing each other is gonna not work out so well. Um, Maybe it's a little too convenient for some people, but there's not enough for me to go on in this issue to be like, oh, it doesn't work or it's awful. And it's just the action that you mentioned, Adam, too, is just top notch, and every layout is different. And Dragata uses like splash pages. Like that's not just a panel, that's the whole page. Like it's just everything is maximum impact. And it's something too that it's worth rereading because you get something different out of it going in the second time, knowing where the story's going. And you get payoffs like Batman. Whenever you hear, you do not open this door.
That was
Like
good.
that goes brilliantly to later on. And it's horrific too, because as bad as the stuff that the mutants, or not the mutants, the party animals do, like there's a heightened reality to it, heightened aspect to it. But how Bruce encounters tragedy in this version feels really fresh and really raw in a 2024 perspective. This isn't, I don't think it's really spoiling anything to say this isn't Crime Alley. And it's something more, unfortunately, common for today's society. And I don't know, it's something about it. It hit so differently. And just seeing, Batman as he still worked out extremely hard. He still learned all these different aspects but he's immersed himself in Gotham in a completely different way. And just the art, the coloring, even like you can't say enough about how beautiful like the Gotham skylines look. Just Frank Martin did a fantastic job, just bringing Dragota's art to life. And like I said, it's something full of surprises as we learn about this Batman, who's definitely, like Adam mentioned, the hand chopping. There are other things that his costume does that you wouldn't expect that seem more lethal, but you got to go along with the story and see just how far this Batman's willing to go. But I am all in to find out, to use the phrase, I'm all in to find out more about it and see where we go from here, because thank you. It feels like Batman. It feels grounded. And I know Snyder may have left a bad taste in people's mouths the way he exited between Death Metal and was it Batman Last Night on Earth, which was a very sci-fi end of the world type of story. So if you're concerned about that, I mean, this brings it right back down. Batman's, I wouldn't say he's broke, but he doesn't have the resources that we're used to him having. And there's nothing fantastical about this, really. It's just a lot of hard work and preparation and, street level crime. But I've rambled far enough for right now. Chris, what did you think of it?
I have often called Batman my favorite character in fiction.
You have.
Sometimes that fluctuates, between he and Superman, but Batman has pretty consistently remained the holder of that title in my mind. And for my
well, it's the car, right? Chris loves the car.
And chicks too, But so because of that, naturally, any new conception of who he is, there's room for alternative takes, but that doesn't mean that an alternative take that gets away from what I feel the spirit of Batman is and should be across different versions should be discarded. It's one of the reasons why I had a bigger problem, and it's just personal perspective, personal opinion, but it's one of the reasons why I had a problem with the early DCEU conception of Batman. It just didn't jive with the guy that I've been reading and the guy that I hold in such high esteem. So because of that, any new conception not only needs to have a level of authenticity to the core of who Batman is, beyond the typical trappings associated with the character. It has to be in his heart, basically. And I am perfectly willing to sit and absorb a story that makes a case for a different version of the guy that I love so much, as long as it's good and as long as it has something interesting to say about that core constitution of who Batman is and what he's supposed to represent. Absolute Batman #1 did the job pretty effectively, because when you try to distill the trappings of his character, his wealth probably counts in that pretty well. His family dynamic, his role in the upper echelons of Gotham City, you can eject all that stuff and still have a Batman story with Batman. And that's what Absolute Batman did. It got down to the essence of his mission, despite the fact that this is a version of the DC universe defined by struggle via Darkseid. You really do get the sense, or at least I really got the sense reading this first issue over the 2 times that I did read it, that when you do take away his wealth, and when you do take away his stature in Gotham City, those things really aren't that important to who Batman is. Those, for Bruce Wayne, those are a means to accomplish his mission in the primary DC universe and in most adaptations of the character. But the mission is the thing that needs to be consistent. And in my mind, a commitment to avoiding being a lethal enforcer is a critical component of who he is. Grant Morrison forever burned that into my brain over the course of my life, on top of, the stories that show Batman at his best by having the compassion, even if he doesn't broadcast it, to realize and to take to heart that if you kill someone, you not only kill who they are now, but you kill everything they could ever be. And, I think that's something that Batman really has to understand at an inherent level because of what was done to him. He got a very early, raw, visceral look and a violent look at how someone can die, particularly someone close to him. And unfortunately, Javi said it very effectively and eloquently. The ravages of that kind of violence are commonplace today, which is deeply unnerving and unfortunate and disconcerting on a whole bunch of levels. But I would like to think that the hope that can be extracted from that is a desire to reduce harm. That is also a core component of who Batman is, something that I feel should be maintained across different versions. If you get there from on a different road, you take a different lane on the freeway to get to that destination, that's okay. As long as it's there, then I'm happy, because there's plenty more new things to say and new things to add about who he is and what he's about. So I'm satisfied and intrigued by the core of who this Batman is and who he's supposed to be. But I am also in a position as a longtime Batman fan, just like you guys, where the lack of those accoutrements, you could say, like his wealth, like his status, that aren't there, could definitely lead to novel applications of what he can accomplish, from the ground floor like this, I don't think we've seen as prominent a version of Batman without those things trying to do what we see DCU Batman doing on a regular basis when it comes to the dedication to his mission, his holy war, as he has called it.
Yeah.
So that's really intriguing to me. The beating heart at the center of this guy is familiar. That is the thing I find most relieving, honestly, because it didn't have to do that necessarily. But if you want to read a Punisher story, just pick up an issue of the Punisher. That's what he's there for. That's not who Batman is
right now.
Well, most of the time you can pick up a Punisher issue and read a Punisher story. So despite the fact that this is a darker conception of the DCU, the fact that Batman at his core is so recognizable gives me a greater level of optimism that the other characters are going to follow suit in a similar way, but with hopefully these same kinds of flourishes around the edges of what we normally associate with their identities.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that like this was a transformative reading experience for me, but it was a satisfying one.
Agreed.
And I am perfectly happy taking that. The artwork is beautiful, even if there are misgivings about certain choices made in the design. All that stuff, like his wealth and like his status, is secondary to who he really is.
Well said.
And I know this guy, and I know what drives him, even if the details are a little bit different. That's the thing that I am very pleased with. And I think there's plenty of room to tell some new, novel, and interesting stories, especially if he is a force of hope in Gotham working against the tide of despair as defined by Darkseid. This could be something really special, and this was a very strong first showing, definitely.
Well said. As we wrap up here, I just want to add one thing I'm going to give. This is a great image to leave on here, Javi, because one of the things I thought was a brilliant idea is Scott Snyder. He really tried to work in, like you said. I love how you said this, Chris. Was the familiar aspects of what makes Bruce, Batman or Batman, right? And I love that you kept saying familiar. You know this guy, but there's a lot of the intricacies of the character are different, and purposely, because like you said, you didn't have to go this route. You could go on like on the brutal Punisher version, right? That's the very typical lazy way out. Instead, he's trying a different avenue, and not in a very obvious way, but more of like you guys have both said, a unfortunate, realistic, a way to relate to this character in the modern day, which sucks, but it's the truth. And then you put all that into it, and I'm going to look at it from a design aspect. And at first, people are saying like this, on the surface, when I first saw it, it was a little jarring of this like giant beefed up, went to McDonald's, and ate the protein shake 8 times. Like Batman is a little jarring again, but in the context of the story, and now in retrospect, it's kind of a brilliant thing because you automatically know by the shape of this character which version it is immediately. There's no like, well, it's a slender version. Like there's no like, artistic liberties taken to an extent. It's literally, you got to make this guy beefy as F. And I like that. I think that's going to do this version of the character well and have it have its own legacy just based on the look alone, because now people can, when they're looking at just the covers and just looking at Batman stories for whatever, they'll see that version and go, okay, that version's different than this Neil Adams slender version that I saw that in the Man Who Laughs like collection, or he's similar, but he's different than the Jim Lee and Hush, that kind of thing. Like you're going to immediately know by the beefy tone, and I say beefy tone in a goofy, funny way, but literally it's this bigger version. You automatically transport your mind and going, okay, this is that version of the Batman, not, it just by the shape alone, it's so immediate. And I think that's a genius idea to really signify this is a different version.
That's twice in 1 month that Jim Lee has drawn a long-eared Batman. If you look at his variant for the last Halloween, which I always like to see a long-eared Batman. So
I for me, really quick, I kind of am all over the place with the ears. I like short, I like long. It just kind of depends on the story and the artist, So, as we, we'll start wrapping up here, guys. And this is, I'm intrigued by the whole I did it. The whole Absolute universe, and I'm in. Like I want to see. They've got they have great creative teams for these coming out. So Kelly Thompson, Wonder Woman, I'm stoked.
And the main DC books too.
For sure. Yeah, that goes without saying, right?
This cover is by Javi Fernandez, who today just did his first issue of Batman Robin 14 that I mentioned earlier. Like, they're killing it on that book. 1 issue in. Like, I'm already like,
I'm in. Yeah,
one of the best issues I've read in that very short 14 issue run. But it's already up there with like top 2 issues for that series.
Wow.
So it's just across the board with the different titles. A lot of promising new directions. So
yeah, for sure. Okay, we'll just do some final thoughts here, and we'll get out of here. Pizza time, Absolute Adam. Final thoughts.
I wasn't expecting Spider-Man to show up for a panel, but it was cool. And
What?
there's it's a sound effect.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, right on.
Yeah, I think this is a cool book. Check it out. If you, especially like, because I feel like a lot of people are just jaded on some of the mainline stuff going on these days, and I don't know, you may or may not enjoy this if that description fits you. So
Okay. Javi Trujillo, El Corazon.
Why don't you send it to Chris?
Okay.
Let me formulate.
All right, Chris, Reverend, after watching the Not Joker movie yesterday, into today, into the Absolute Batman, final thoughts on this?
Good palate cleanser.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well,
I liked the movie for the record.
Yeah.
For the record, I liked the movie. Not as much as you, but I liked it. Chris, I apologize.
No, it's all right. Look, I don't know if I'm all in necessarily because comics are a little more expensive than they used to be, but I'm in.
yeah, that's fair.
So
Yeah.
you know, I'm
Slightly in.
Yeah, right. Like, you know, I got my foot in the door, most definitely. Look, I'll definitely check out what the first issues have to say. I hope they are as aligned with the long-standing cores of the characters as this one was. No reason to think they won't be, but it's just, you know, you never know. But this is a really strong showing. The all-in special is a great setup for what's going to happen in both universes, and also really happy to see not only Mark Waid back with Superman starting this week, but Justice League Unlimited was teed up in a really nice way and all in as well. But as it pertains to Absolute Batman, very strong first issue, particularly for a wholly new version of who this guy is. Like I said before, totally new version, but I know who he is at his core. And that's the thing I was most concerned about. And thankfully that was unfounded.
All right. Javi, can't escape now.
Yeah, there's just a lot of new dynamics that get set up in this one issue, and we didn't really cover it because we didn't want to get too spoilery, but there was so much there that makes me want to come back and see more about this world and how beyond like the crime fighting stuff, you know, what is Bruce going to do, and the personal connections that he has, like how is that going to play out over the course of this series? Because there are a lot of different dynamics, and we haven't even touched the surface of them yet. One major one in particular, I think, is going to have a profound impact. If you want to know what that is, go buy the book and read it. I mean, it was $5, right?
It's $4.99.
Yeah, and if you compare it to the $5 that Ultimate Spider-Man is, which is another book I love, this is an oversized, hefty book, much like the main character itself. And you definitely get your $5 worth out of this comic. There's just so much to take away from it. The visuals, I mean, we've been showing pages all hour, and it's a stunning book with lots of surprises. And just when you think you know where it's going to go, it turns left and then it turns right. But it's still, is it the absolute Batman? Like the be all end all? It's too soon to tell, but it is definitely Batman. And it's one that I'm looking forward to reading further adventures from. And just like I mentioned earlier, just the all in initiative as well. Like it's not wiping stuff out. It's not rebooting. It's, you know, recommitting to things and bringing in new voices and, or maybe new voices or familiar voices to new characters and getting to do different things with them, which is exciting as well. So just all across the DC line, both Absolute and Main, there's a lot of cool stuff that I can't wait to read and get into, and we'll see where it all goes. But for a monthly Batman book, it's hard to, I feel like I want to say it's the main continuity, but it's not. but it is. It's like main continuity adjacent because
Yeah.
it spins out. I liked your Star Trek analogy, Chris, but it's a solid book to me, and I'm
Agreed.
happy that it's here. So I can't wait
Same.
to read more.
I'm surprised. I'll be honest. If I would have told myself I love this book as much as I did, I would not believe myself or be shocked. And I am a little surprised. It's one issue. Let's see what the rest has, but it's a promising start. Next week, I think we can say officially we've got we're getting some Superman back in the fold. We're just DC heavy these days, man. I gotta get back to some other books. DC heavy doesn't matter. DC Studios. Superman, our Road to Superman coming out in July. We start off with the Alan Moore comic books of Superman, one of the most famous comic writers tackling the Man of Steel. The Man of Comics meets the Man of Steel. Yes, I said it. Anyway, that's next week. Lot of good stuff to get into that. That's gonna be a fun episode.
That's gonna be
Adam, you're coming back for that one. Just gonna say it right now.
Yeah.
Get on it.
Oh yeah, I committed to that. Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
I'm curious if it's gonna be as harmonious as this episode. I don't think it's gonna be the Clown at Midnight, but
No, it won't be the Clown at Midnight.
but you know, we'll
We'll
talk
see.
in a
We'll
week.
We'll talk in a week. All right, Chris, why don't you take us out, my friend?
Oh man, it's been a while.
It has, yeah.
Read more comics.
Good night, everybody.